Welcome to Lifestyle Solopreneur, the community for entrepreneurs who put lifestyle first. Join your host Flavia Barris as she interviews successful lifestyle solopreneurs and shares ideas to help you find the perfect balance between lifestyle, business, and self. Flavia is an attorney, marketing expert, and founder of several online academies. She's been featured in major media including BBC World News, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Post, ESPN Television, and more. Join us for this episode of Lifestyle Solopreneur. Hey, Lifestyle Solopreneurs. Today we get to talk to Trevor Lohrbeer. He is a serial entrepreneur whose mission it is to help others live more fulfilling lives by reaching their potential. His current startup is a time management web app called Day Optimizer that helps solopreneurs create more effective daily plans using guided workflows based on neuroscience principles. He is an avid swing dancer and he lives part-time in Berlin, Germany. Welcome to the show, Trevor.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you here. So tell us a little bit about what you do for a living. Like I see here, you have an app, you've done a lot of things in your past. How would you describe your current career?
It's interesting to use the word career since I've been an entrepreneur for so many years. I don't think of that as being a career, but I work in the IT space I've been developing web apps since 1995. So think of any sort of like thing you might use on the internet. The thing that I'm working on right now is a app called Day Optimizer that helps solopreneurs create more effective daily plans by using a guided workflow based on neuroscience principles. But I also do some consulting on the side with web app development, helping people develop online software from washing machines to helping process loan applications, just different sort of things like that.
Oh, that's fascinating. So how does the neuroscience piece tie into what's effectively like a daily planner system? How does neuroscience intersect with the act of planning and putting an agenda together and, getting through your day?
So I think it's the way you put together your daily plan can either be enhanced or can be harmed, or not necessarily harmed, but limited based upon the way our brains work. So for instance, one of the things I teach within the app and is also within just the method itself is this process called CASE. It is commit, allocate, schedule, and evaluate. And so it's 4 steps for planning your day. It's particularly planning, creating a daily schedule. And one of the reasons you use 4 separate steps is that it helps optimize your working memory and the brain activation, the way your brain works to make it more effective. So the steps again, like commit is where I decide what I want to do today. Allocate is where I then go and I assign time to each of those. And then schedule is where I put that all on a schedule. And then evaluate is when I overbook myself and I say, okay, what do I need to remove from that schedule? But you can also do it where I do it what's called like a one-piece flow process, where I think of something I need to do today. I say, okay, I'm going to spend half an hour on this and I add it to my schedule. And then I think of something else I want to do. Okay, I'm going to spend an hour on marketing today. I add that to my schedule. And if you go through that process, what's going to happen is a couple different things. Is one, as you see your schedule shrink, you're going to start consciously or unconsciously under allocating time. Because most of us want to get more done in our day than as much as we can do in our day. And so when we see like the amount of time available, time shrinking, we start consciously or unconsciously underestimating. So that thing that normally we'd say takes an hour, oh, I can do that in a half an hour. That thing a half an hour I can do in 15 minutes. And so we come up with a less realistic schedule at the end. Whereas if we instead make sure that we assign time to every single one of our tasks before we even start writing out the schedule, that helps us optimize that schedule. It takes away that bias. Another aspect is the fact that when we're in each of these steps, they activate our brains in different ways. So when I'm trying to figure out what do I need to do today, that's a brainstorming mode, right? I need to think of what is everything that is important for me to do today. And maybe I'm prioritizing and figuring out what are my top key three things to do, et cetera. That's very different from allocating, which is like this analytical mode where what I need to be doing is figuring out, okay, how much time do I really have to give to this thing today? And doing them all in single steps let me calibrate between those different things. If I take half an hour for lunch, it's going to be at least half an hour for dinner. So these separate steps work to help optimize our brain, the way our brains work. I call these thinking modes. It's often, another example is when you do writing. A useful technique is to outline, write, and then edit. If you're trying to outline at the same time you're writing and editing at the same time you're writing, it can get very difficult because creativity is flowing when you're in the flow, and editing is about being very detail oriented and picking things apart. And if you're trying to pick things apart as you're writing, you're in conflict with yourself and your brain is going in two different directions. In one sense, you're doing convergent thinking. The other sense, you're doing divergent thinking. So by separating those things out, we actually make our brains more effective. So that's just one of the techniques there. The case planning method teaches you, creates these steps to make our brain more effective. But then there's some other things as well.
That's fascinating. And I think so many people are overwhelmed by their to-do list and by the number of things that they have to do. I think the worst thing someone can do is just to try to hold it all in their brain. I've got my to-do list up here. They tap their forehead. I'm a big believer in sort of brain dumping and getting all of that out of your head so that you can work with it better. But I'm a visual person, and maybe that's why it works for me a lot better to kind of see everything, right? I'm visual. I like to see things. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see entrepreneurs or others make in how they put together their days or even their to-do list or task list? What are some of these pain points that your software solves?
So the biggest mistake I think a lot of entrepreneurs make is that they don't actually plan their day. They just jump into their day. And so they are doing it based upon where their attention is. Sometimes it's the priorities and sometimes it's not. And so I'm a big advocate, and I tell people just spend 5 minutes at the beginning of your day. Those 5 minutes or 10 minutes you are going to make back multiple times by figuring out exactly what you should be doing that day, in what order you should be doing it, making sure it aligns with your energy, all the sort of things that you can do to actually have a much more effective day. So if you're not actually taking time to plan, that's the first step. And then the second thing you mentioned is don't try to keep things in your head. There's a lot of neuroscience out there that talks about how when we try to keep things in our head, we create these open loops and it makes it harder for us to focus on other things. We can take that technique, we can use that technique to our benefit sometimes when we purposely keep something in our head because we want to come back to it and gain some momentum from it without procrastinating. But when you're trying to keep too many things in your head, you are just basically using up all that brain CPU power to keep track of those things and not actually focusing on what you're working on. So doing that brain dump is really important. But then the second thing I would say is don't just have a master task list. So the first thing, if the only thing you do in the day optimizer method is create your commitment list, is every day look at your master task list and write a separate list of what you're going to do today. That puts you into this deliberate decision-making process of what is important. And it helps avoid a common procrastination thing, or a common distraction issue, which is you've just finished something and you need to work on something next. So you look at your master task list, and instead of the next priority, you pick the thing that's easier, something that's lower down on the list. Or you don't even start doing it, but you see it and suddenly your brain starts thinking about it and you get distracted by it. And now you're ineffective for the next 15, 20 minutes until you can get that out of your head and actually work on what you should be working on. So doing that at the beginning of the day and actually going through your list and saying, this is what I should be working on today, I think is critical.
How does someone use your tools to also prevent overwork? Because here on this podcast, we're really into maintaining at least some white space. It doesn't have to be white space on your calendar. It might actually be designated, but designated for things like family, fun, hobbies, relaxation, self-care, all the different categories other than work, and sort of protecting that space on your calendar. But time blocking is one way to do that, designating specific times or days or portions of days that you specifically reserve for family or friends or the fun in your life. That's one technique. How would someone do that with your app, or what's your recommendation on because your app, I know, would make it really easy to allocate time for all of the things that need to get done. But how do you advise people to still preserve some sanity in their life?
In two different ways. One is that the app has three different concepts of a to-do, right? So the first is a task, which is what everyone's familiar with. The second is an appointment, which is a to-do that happens at a specific time. But then the third one is activities. And these are things that take up time in our day that are never done. So things like eating lunch, it can be exercising, it can be taking the time out to write family and friends or connect with family and friends. Actually, like having that in your planning process where you're looking through that and saying, what are these things that I want to do, I think is important. And making sure that you're adding into your day. Now, if there's different ways to plan, like you can plan and schedule out all your time a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance. People who do that using Google Calendar. That's not the method I tend to use. And most of the customers of Day Optimizer, based on the name, don't do that. They plan their day by day. And in this case, what you're doing is you are still doing time blocking, and you're using Day Optimizer to use your time blocking and using these activities to block out and say, okay, here's the half an hour I'm doing exercise. Here's when I'm going to go and take my break. Here's when I'm going to go do this. And then so you can really focus on creating this rhythm. And I often talk about sometimes people who work at home fall into the idea, when you work in the office, you're always working with a kind of a separated work-life balance, right? You go into the office, you work, and you come home. Whereas when you're working at home, or if you're an entrepreneur and you have a much more flexible schedule, you can really do this integrated work-life balance where you're working a little bit, then you're living a little bit, then you're working, and you're kind of interweaving them. So maybe you work for an hour or two in the morning, then you go for a run, you go have coffee with a friend, you come back, you do some more work. And so being able to block that out, I think, is important. So in Day Optimizer, you do that through activities, as well as anything that is on your calendar automatically syncs in. So you're blocking those off as well.
What a great way to look at it. And what's on your horizon? So when you look ahead and you have goals for your company and your projects, everything you're working on, what are some of the big things that you are driving towards in the next year or two?
So two things is a lot more education around the different techniques around time management I'm going to be doing. But the other thing, the last kind of major feature in the Day Optimizer planning system is this concept called task stacks. And the idea there is to use something called task stacks, not lists. And a task stack is where I actually have every single thing I need to do, but it's on a separate index card. I mean, if you're doing this in the paper form, it's on a separate index card, or I buy these little blank business cards from Amazon, and you can write one on each one. And you can have different colored stacks, one for marketing, one for client work, one for accounting, et cetera. And the idea there is a lot of people get overwhelmed when they look at the length of their task list. And they also get distracted by the lower priority items on that list. So if instead you have a stack and you sort that based on priority and make sure that like the most important things are at the top, then you can use techniques like time blocking to say, okay, from 2 to 4, I'm going to be working on marketing. And at that time, I'm going to come and I'm going to pick the first item off the stack and I'm going to work on that until it's finished, or work until the 2 hours are done. And this allows you to stay a lot more focused and make sure that you're constantly focusing on the next most important thing without getting distracted. So Day Optimizer, you can do that right now currently because you can create checkbox lists within the notes field, but I'm going to add a lot more native capability to create task stacks that integrate a little bit better within Day Optimizer.
And, especially for anyone that is like me, like very visual, and for anyone who's very tactile, I think just that concept of feeling like you have like a deck of cards, right? Like a stack of things, and you can shuffle them and you can lay them out, fan them out, whether it's virtually in an app or even, in real life. I mean, that was a great piece of advice, not just for organizing your day, but I know someone that teaches book writing in that way. They say, on each of these cards, put down something about your topic that you want to teach. And then those get shuffled and they kind of become the chapters and the skeleton of the book. You can lay them out. You can see how your book would flow. So I love that concept. And I think for a lot of us, the last time we used index cards was maybe the university or, back in school, but it's a great tool to have that, a way to put information on its own little spot. There's a great writing tool. I haven't used it in years, so I'm going to give them a plug, but I don't know if they're still around because I haven't been using it. But I used to, when I was teaching publishing many years ago, I would tell people this is a great tool for writing your book. It was called Scrivener. I don't know if you've heard of it, but Scrivener was just a nice visual cork board. So they actually had like a cork board background, and then you'd put up index cards, virtual index cards with ideas or, brainstorm. And then you could write each section and put it together into a book, and it would export it into like a Kindle format or whatever you needed. It was great software, and I really enjoyed it. May have to check it out and see if they're still around next time I have a big writing project. But I love that you've devoted your career, at least right now, as you said, you do a lot of different things, but right now to optimizing people's days for them? I mean, to help give them these tools so that they can be more productive and feel less overwhelmed. Because I think overwhelm is a soul-sucking common thing right now. Do you think overwhelm is the main force driving people to an app like yours?
Yes, absolutely. I think people feel overwhelmed, especially when you're a solopreneur and you are the one who has to do everything. Like if you're an employee in a company, you might play a single role and someone else is sending out the bills, someone else is doing the sales, someone else is doing all the other things. But when you're a solopreneur or a small business person, then you're doing everything. And it can feel very overwhelming because there's always an endless amount of things to do. So I'm really big about trying to be strategic with your time and really thinking what's going to have the biggest impact. And then because there's always an endless list of things to do, you really have to reclaim that time for yourself, for your personal life. Because if you let it, your business will just eat everything. And so deliberately saying, I'm only going to spend 5 hours today on this or 3 hours or whatever you're going to say, being very deliberate on that, I think can help you regain the sense of control. And I think that is what's really at the core of being overwhelmed, is when we don't feel like we're in control. So the tools that allow us to be more in control can help us be less overwhelmed.
And that's so important because the more anxiety-free and the more organized we feel in our work life, I think that translates over into your personal life, because then when you are having a nice dinner with friends or family, you haven't brought all that stress and, all your reminders in your head and all of that with you. You can actually truly relax because you've sort of organized things in your work life so that you can relax when you're off duty, right?
Exactly. I think that's critical, is being able to unload your brain when you go back into your personal life.
So how did this idea come up when you decided to get involved in this venture? What was the catalyst? Because I'm sure there was a time before you were working on Day Optimizer. So what was the shift from that time before to starting and jumping in?
Yeah. So I'll go back a couple years. I used to have a data visualization company. We sold enterprise software to large companies like Walmart, Dell, the US Army, et cetera. I sold that business in 2015. I had to work 2 years for the acquirer. And after that, I was wondering, what did I want to do next? And I decided I wanted to help people build strategic life plans, because I create these very long, probably too long life plans that talk about where am I going, et cetera. So I built out a whole business around that. The company is actually called Strategic Life Tools. And there's a website called Strategic Life Tools that still has all these tools. It was a membership site that I made free when I started Day Optimizer. But basically, they were different tools for life planning, figuring out where you are and where you need to get to. I discovered after launching that business that it was going to be a one-time sale business. And so my last business was enterprise sales, which means every month you start your revenue at zero. And I got bought out by a company that was a subscription business, a software as a service business. And I saw the power of that business model. And I decided I really wanted, above anything else, a subscription business as my next business. And I thought that, maybe I could make this life planning business into a subscription business. But as you might imagine, people do life planning at cusp events. I just graduated, I just got divorced, I just retired, et cetera. And otherwise, they don't tend to think about it too much. So it makes it very hard to create a recurring payment model when the usage isn't recurring. Nonetheless, I created a whole business. I ran, or not the whole business, but I created 8 or 10 different modules, ran people through a kind of group coaching program. And at the end, people were talking about how they were just struggling with time management and they couldn't go through all the exercises because they didn't have enough time. And I had been doing this technique for about 10 years now, just on myself. I would write it on 2 different index cards. In the morning, I'd write on one index card everything that I want to do that day. Then I'd go and I'd write how much time I want to spend on each item next to it. Then on the next index card, I'd write 9 o'clock in the morning, copy over the first item, add the time, 10:30, and just kind of build out a whole schedule manually that way. And so I wrote up a whole tutorial on this technique for people, created a little mini Excel spreadsheet. And then a few months later, I was going through the process of figuring out where I wanted to pivot to and realized that that was a really good app that I could build very easily that would then could be enhanced much more than the paper version and could provide a lot of value because lots of people are struggling with time management. And then when you're developing software that someone's using every single day, it's much easier to charge them a monthly fee. So that's how I kind of basically pivoted away from strategic life tools into Day Optimizer and was the kind of genesis of Day Optimizer.
What are some other apps or software or tools that you use in your own daily life that you think are just really great ways to either be more efficient or stay more productive or stay more calm? I know there's an app by that name, Calm, that a lot of people have endorsed here on the podcast and just in day-to-day conversation. I mean, there's a lot out there that can help us live better lives and as entrepreneurs, more productive and efficient and sort of scalable lives. What are some of your favorites?
Yeah. So in the meditation space, I like Waking Life because they teach you the different forms of meditation. So there's several different forms of meditation and they teach that very well. I just discovered Workona. It's WORKONA, which allows you to kind of organize all your browser tabs into these different workspaces and basically just use like one browser window, but it will automatically open and close everything, keep everything in sync, lets you sync with different computers. And I've been having a lot of enjoyment now that's been helping me organize my tab chaos because I can have 200-300 tabs open at once. A lot of times I'm working on a project and then I have to switch to something else and I just leave all the tabs from that project open. Sometimes I bookmark them. I have a folder called Workspaces. So I'll bookmark all of them into that, but that takes a lot of time. With this Workona, I can actually just click on it and close it and automatically saves all the tabs. And then when I'm ready, I click open and it reopens everything and I can organize everything really nicely. So I've been really enjoying that. And then the last thing I would say that I tend to use a lot are the binaural beats or the audio entrainment apps. So Brain FM, I'll use for focusing. That's, I'll just listen to it. It's also good for pacing because I can set a half an hour timer and I know a half an hour's passed. So if I'm doing an hour and a half work block, I might do 3 half-an-hour Brain FM sessions, and it keeps me focused and keeps me aware of the time passing. But I've also used another app called Brainwave on the iOS that allows me to do power naps, where it actually will bring my mind down into a sleep state or a very rest state. I don't necessarily completely fall asleep. And then after 10, 15 minutes, it brings my mind back up and wakes me back up again. And they also have some meditation and some other stuff on that. So audio entrainment really works for me. And I encourage everyone, if they haven't tried it, to try it, either binaural beats or isochronic tones. You can just even go to YouTube and search for those terms and find videos that will use those for focus, for sleep, for all sorts of different stuff.
That's great. I love that. I wrote those down. I definitely want to check them out. So it's been great to chat with you today and for you to have put this event, our chat, on your calendar, right? I'm sure your Day Optimizer showed, today's meeting on there, and we all appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to be here with us. What are some sort of parting words or last message that you want to send out to listeners today?
I really encourage people to add an appointment to their calendar that says stop doing plan. Ideally weekly, definitely monthly. And if it's weekly, maybe you can, if you're feeling stressed, just do it for an hour. But the more time you can give it, the better. Definitely 4 hours or more if you're doing it monthly. Too often we get caught in the doing. And we're so focused on the doing, we forget to lift our head up and take a view of the landscape and figuring out, is what I'm working on the thing that's going to have the biggest impact right now? Or am I just doing it because I already decided I was doing it? So we don't course correct often enough. And so having a recurring event on your calendar that says stop doing plan to remind you to take that time out to plan, I think is important.
Excellent advice. Trevor, it's been so good to speak with you today. I know people can find you at dayoptimizer.com if they want to check out Day Optimizer. Any other places where they can connect with you?
Yeah, certainly. So on Twitter, I'm personally at Fast Fedora, and Day Optimizer is Day Optimizer app. I also run a YouTube channel called Mindful Productivity that teaches different techniques, frameworks, and concepts for living a good life while having an impact. But yeah, dayoptimizer.com is the place to try out the app. And anyone has any questions, they can just email me at trevor@dayoptimizer.com, and I'm happy to answer them.
Well, you and I and listeners are definitely of the same fabric, right? Because we are all about lifestyle and ways to achieve the lifestyle that we want in our work and beyond. And your app is a great tool towards that end. So thank you so much for chatting about it, explaining what it does, taking us through that. I've learned a lot. I know people listening have learned a lot too. And we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Guess what, lifestyle solopreneurs? If you don't yet have an online business earning you enough passive income to live the life of your dreams, I'd like to suggest you consider trying out Kajabi. Kajabi is an all-in-one solution where you can create and teach online courses, publish a paid newsletter, launch a free or paid podcast, process payments, build one-on-one coaching portals for your clients, and much, much more. I personally use Kajabi to power numerous successful and profitable online businesses. Lifestyle solopreneurs, there's a free trial of Kajabi waiting for you at this link, www.kfreetrial.com. You can try Kajabi for free, no obligation, by going to www.kfreetrial.com. Again, kfreetrial.com, and that K stands for Kajabi. Starting an online business helped me break free from that corporate grind, and I hope it does the same for you. You have nothing to lose and absolutely everything to gain. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, and see you next time.